Financial Planner, Float on YouTube.
The globalist economic structure is slowly being dismantled. Let's get into the economic collapse financial news. Now we need to keep in mind something very important. We've been looking at the economic indicators, we've been looking at GDP, housing, unemployment, and we've been looking at all the statistical numbers that the government puts out, the central bank puts out. We hear what the corporate media is saying, we see the stock market rising, and we need to remember that the central banks, they are absolute pros at making it look like the economy is doing well when it really isn't. This is their trick. This is what they've been using for thousands of years. And yes, the bank has been around for thousands of years, not here in the United States, but around the world. And they've come and gone, and here we are once again. They're bigger than ever. And they know and they have the ability to convince everyone that the economy is doing well. And when it crashes, they have the ability to say it wasn't our fault, it was the government's fault, it was the people's fault, it was everyone else's fault except theirs. And this is done on purpose. But one thing we need to remember is that the everyday person, when they lose their job, when they're not making money or they're making a lot less money, and they have a lot of debt, and when you retire, your money is not there, you realize how bad the situation is. Now, even if you do retire and you're receiving your pension, that pretty much stays static while you see inflation. Gas prices move up, electricity increases, food prices go up, and the money that they told you were going to need for retirement, which would be more than enough, is never enough. This is why we see a lot of the older generation getting part-time jobs right now. And the situation is just getting worse because we are at the end of the entire fiat cycle. It only lasts for about 45, maybe 50 years at the most. And once it's all said and done, you can't go any further. And here we are today. Now we see that 65% of Americans, they save little or nothing. Half of them, they struggle through retirement. And what we're seeing today, it's not just the older generation, it's the younger generation that has gone through college, put themselves into debt, and they can't find those high-paying jobs that they were promised. Yes, there was a certain period of time where people could come out of college and find that job. This was in the beginning stages to the middle stage of their fiat system. But when we're at the end of the system, it just doesn't work anymore. And this is what we're seeing right now. We're starting to see a lot of indicators showing us that the people's economy, what you can feel and touch, it's really starting to decline very, very rapidly. Housing starts, permits, they're plunging. Rental units, they're crashing. And we can see the housing data came out, and the housing sales data is completely dismal. We see that permits have plunged in February, and multifamily unit data, well, that has declined very, very rapidly. We're seeing a 7% plunge in housing starts. Now, they thought it was only going to be negative 2.7%, but it's much, much lower than that. We see a 5.7% tumble in permits. This is the biggest since February of 2017. It's starting to look like the housing bubble has popped. And if we look at housing starts year on year, and we look at the graph, we can see the trajectory is downward. And if we go back in time, we can see from 2008 to 2011, it was pumped up once again, then it dropped, and they pumped it up very, very slowly. But now we're declining ever since 2012, and they can't do anything about it. And we're getting to the point where we're at 0%. That's where we were back in 2006. And here we are once again, which means that this is another indicator letting us know we're on the path of everything starting to fall apart. We talked about retail quite a bit. How these retail stores, these huge chains, how they're going bankrupt. Well, Moody's is out there And they're saying, well, it looks like there's a lot more bankruptcies. They are coming. And they're saying that we're going to see a lot of these retailers go belly up. And we're already starting to see a lot of them, and it happened in 2017. In 2018, it's just going to get worse. So what Moody's is saying, and what their research report is saying, is that they're forecasting at least 6 retail and apparel issuers defaulting over the next 12 months, with most of these occurring in the first half of the year. The problem is that it only gets worse from there, and the rating agency expects upcoming maturities for distressed issuers will spike in 2019. Defaults are growing as many struggle with high leverage and challenge operating performance. These challenges are compounded by the biggest risk, mounting maturities, which spike in 2019. Now, a lot of these retailers have debt coming due. They have these maturities that are coming due in 2019, and we see a lot of stores. Sears, well, they're in a huge amount of trouble. Neiman Marcus, Clears, Buy Low, Guitar Center, 99-cent stores, Nine West, Evergreen, and it just goes on and on and on, and the situation is just going to get worse and worse. It's not going to improve. I mean, look at Toys R Us today. I mean, something that's been around for, 70 years? Completely gone. Same thing with Radio Shack. We're going to see it happen with Sears. Most of these stores will not exist anymore. Everything is completely falling apart. And it has to fall apart. Don't get me wrong. Because this system that we're in, this is a globalist central bank system. They've developed it, they created it, they molded it, and they made everyone believe that everything was fine. I mean, go back to the late 70s, the 80s, the 90s. There were people on there saying that the middle class was going to disappear, we're adding too much debt, this, as we move forward, won't be able to be sustained, and things are going to start to break down. Well, we saw the breakdown in 2008. But the central banks, they have the ability, and they know how to manipulate the system so they can keep it running. And they can't do it forever, and they know this. This is why they've been preparing since that time to make sure that they can move their system to another location. They weren't quite finished in 2008. They had more to do. And we can see right now, it looks like they're pretty much ready to go. Now, at the same time, Trump is dismantling everything that they put in place. Now, it'd be great if he can just, say, I want everything gone all at once. But it's quite impossible. They've been doing this since 1913. I mean, if you don't even want to go back that far, let's say they've been doing this since 1971 when we went on the petrodollar system. That's about 47 years ago. And to dismantle everything that they've done in in those 47 years, to do it within 1 year, it's pretty darn impossible. You're going to need a lot more time, but you can see right now that the TPP, the NAFTA, all the bilateral trades that are going to be worked out here, the tariffs that are being put into place, getting rid of the World Trade Organization, all of these things were put into place to keep the central banking system operational. And once you start removing all these things, the central bank starts to break down. This is the main mission of all this. Now, countries are starting to realize that the dollar will no longer exist. And a lot of people think that the petro yuan is going to take years and years and years to, get up to speed and allow it to become maybe a reserve currency or maybe part of a reserve currency. But it really isn't going to take that much time. It's very simple. All they have to do is make the announcement. I mean, really think about it. They made the announcement when we came off the gold standard in 1971. In World War II, they decided, okay, after the war, let's start a whole new system. And this is really what they wanted to do this time. They wanted to have something like a great war, and after it was all said and done, saying, okay, let's move to the new system. But now we don't have that right now. That has been stopped up to this point. But countries realize that the dollar cannot go on. And we can see that China is liquidating treasuries. According to the latest just released tick data, we see that the Chinese treasury holding declined by 16.7 billion. Now, that is not the only country that is dumping their treasuries. Russia sold about 5.3 billion. United Kingdom sold about 6.7 billion. Belgium sold about 4.5 billion. The Cayman Island hedge funds shed some 3.9 billion. And there are a lot more countries that are selling. Japan right now has stopped their liquidation. They put it on hold right now. But there are other countries saying, okay, we need to start to dump this. Now, they're not going to dump it all at once. They're going to do it very, very slowly. They see what is happening now. The globalist reign is coming to an end. The central bank is being dismantled very slowly. Just like the central bank moved manufacturing out of this country very slowly. Just like the central bank put all their policies into place very slowly. We're seeing the opposite happen now. Let's get rid of NAFTA. Let's get rid of TPP. Let's get rid of the World Trade Organization. Let's get rid of everything that we know of and put into place bilateral trades. Let's put tariffs on countries. Let's do reciprocal taxes. When you start to do all these things, and this is just the beginning, you start to break down the central bank's hold. Once you start to break down the central bank's hold, well, all of a sudden, they're going to try to do whatever they possibly can to keep it all together. And this is where Trump is going with all this. He's in the process of bringing down the central bank globalist system. And to do this, you need to put certain things and to cancel certain things to make this happen. We're going to see a lot more as we move forward, and I think he's going to accelerate the process. Now, the corporate media is going to be out there, and they're going to be screaming and yelling how this is going to damage America. It's going to bring the economy down. If he messes up the markets, he should be impeached. We're going to hear all this news. But this is the agenda. What they're really saying is he's bringing down our system. We like our system. But the people, they can't operate in this system. Eventually, it will hit everyone. I know there's certain groups are saying this is perfectly fine, but eventually it hits the poor, it hits the middle class, it goes to the wealthier, it hits every single one unless you are in the upper tier where you know all the inside information. That's how their system works. And once it keeps moving up, this is when people start to realize, yes, something is wrong. Now it's gone past the middle class already. It's moving up even further than that. And as it keeps moving, people are going to start to realize there is something wrong with our system. This is why we see delinquencies rising. This is why we see charge-offs rising. This is why we see people losing jobs. This is why we see wages declining. This is why all the good jobs are no longer here in the United States. We don't really have that much manufacturing anymore, even though it's being, he's trying to bring it back. But you just can't bring everything back because it took years and years and years to send it off to other countries. You just can't bring it back in months or 2 months or 3 months or 4 months. It's going to take years because you have to undo everything that they did. So here we are. We're in the process. We're in the dismantling phase to trigger the central bank into doing something, to bring the central bank down, to shift the narrative, to take back control. That's what this is all about. Now we're going to go through a transition. Soviet Union went through the transition. We went through a transition in 1971. We went through a transition after World War II. We're going to go through a transition, but this time the reserve currency is leaving the United States. It's going someplace else. And this is going to be a shock to the people here in this country. Because before Bretton Woods, we became the reserve currency. Everything was good. We had manufacturing. 1971, we came off the gold standard and went to a petrodollar standard, but we stayed as the reserve currency. Now, we're at the end of the petrodollar system. We will no longer be the reserve currency. This has been slated for another country where they have manufacturing. Think about when we became the reserve country. I'm talking about the United States. We have manufacturing. The country was booming. We took in other countries' gold. What is happening in China? They're amassing a huge amount of gold. So is Russia. They have all the manufacturing. They have the Belt and Road that they're building right now, where it's going to go through all the manufacturing areas to distribute to the rest of the world. They started the Petro-Yuan. They have all the exchanges like we do here in the United States. They have the payment system like the SWIFT. Theirs is different, but they duplicated it. Why do you think they did all this? Because everything is going to shift. The question is this going to be a central banking system, or is this going to be a people-run system? Now, I do believe that they're going to bring cryptocurrencies into this. I do believe at a lower level that people will be using cryptocurrencies, and these currencies will be within each country. Just like it is today, each country has their own fiat currency, except for the European Union, where they all use the same currency. But this is when they were trying to push their one world currency, their one world government, and this was the beginning stages of it. Now, it's going to turn out that each country, most likely for the people's usage, will have cryptocurrencies. And it won't be created by the central banking system. At higher levels, governments might trade or use a different currency. But where we're headed right now is for a very big change, a very big transition. And it's accelerating, and it's coming very quickly. You can see how much has been done already, and this is just going to accelerate. And the screams are going to get louder and louder as Trump does more. And you're going to hear the screams from the corporate media, from financial pundits, from the central banks, of how bad this is going to be, for the global economy. This is not going to help. This is going to make the situation worse. That's exactly what he's doing. He's getting rid of their system. It's going to be a lot worse for them because they will no longer be in control.